welcome to our program today. I am the host, your host today, Ray Gerard. With me also today is Leslie Farr. Leslie, welcome to our program today.
Hey, thank you very much.
So, Leslie, you're here to talk to us about the Knights of St. Peter Claver. But before we get into that, it's usually, I think, tradition on the program for the guest, if he wants to lead us in a prayer. Would you care to do that?
Sure, yeah.
If you prefer not to, I'll go ahead. But
No, that's fine. In the name of
Okay.
Father, Son, Holy Spirit, amen.
Amen.
Father, we thank you for this day. We thank you for all of the blessings that you've given us, and we thank you more importantly for all the blessings that you've seen fit not for us to have or to be delayed. We ask that you continue to bless our families and bless the members of our clergy and those who are out doing the hard work of evangelizing. In your name we pray, amen.
Amen. Father, Son, Holy Spirit, amen.
All right.
Well, thank you, sir. I caught you a little off
Yeah,
guard.
all right, that's okay. I'm adjustable.
I didn't tell you before we started the program I was going to ask you to do that, but
Yeah, I can move. I'm light on my feet.
So you are a member of an organization called the Knights of St. Peter Claver.
Yes, sir.
For our people who are out there listening who know nothing about the Knights, could you please tell us about? I mean, a lot of people have heard of the Knights of Columbus, but maybe not so many of the Knights of St. Peter Claver.
So the Knights of Peter Claver, we're a Catholic fraternal organization, just like the Knights of Columbus are. We have two divisions: our regular Knights division, which includes up to our 3rd degree, and then our 4th degree, just like the Knights of Columbus. So we're very similar in that. We have our Ladies Auxiliary, which Knights of Columbus, because I'm a member of Knights of Columbus as well. So, we have both. Now, we differ a little bit in that our ladies division is its own governing body division. Membership is not predicated on being related to or married to a knight. You can join our ladies division without having a spouse or a family member that's a knight. So that's a little bit different. We are we're a historically African American organization, started in 1909, about 19 years after the Knights of Columbus. At a time in our country's history, this may be a little bit dark, but it's one of those things we have to talk about. We were founded in Mobile, Alabama, where there were laws in place, and the laws said that blacks and whites couldn't mingle. In fact, we were started as an insurance company, and we still maintain our status as an insurance company. Because back then, in 1909, blacks could not gather in more than the number of 11 unless it was for insurance purposes. Go figure, because the white insurance agents, so they would come in because you had to be licensed by the state, so white insurance agents would come in, so you had to have groups. So that's a little bit about us. We were founded in 1909, and it was an answer to a lot of black men leaving the Catholic Church. There were some things that other organizations may have offered that the Catholic Church did not have in place for black folks. So started an organization where we had fraternal organization where there was some fraternity, allowed for families to be taken care of, the insurance component, put money into widows' pockets. So yeah, that's a brief part of our history. Fast forward a little bit to the 60s. Very active in the civil rights movement. Very, very active. A lot of our members, especially in the southern part of the United States, were heavily involved in the civil rights movement. And today we do some things around town. For example, there's a Unity March, which is sponsored by St. Louis University. Usually starts off at College Church, and then it marches down several major thoroughfares through the city, and they end up at St. Alphonsus Liguori, or better known as St. Alphonsus Rock. And then they have previous years. I don't know what this year looks like, or even if it's feasible to have it this year, but previous years you would walk around and then you would have discussions. The Racial Injustice Committee, started by Archbishop Carlson, heavily involved in that, and generally around the discussions, and the Knights of Peter Claver are a major part of those discussions. We've done some things over at Fontbonne with one of our members, Mary Margaret Moore, to talk about race and social justice and how things are a little bit different. So we're busy, and we've always been in this kind of discussion. which puts our organization ahead of its time. But Father Claver was really ahead of his time. And so, like, we talk about the Knights and Ladies of Peter Claver and how the name was selected. Well, Father Claver was born in the 1850s. And he was born to they weren't super rich. They weren't in the court of the king, but they were nobles. They had a little bit of land. And
what country are you talking about?
In Spain.
In Spain.
In Verdú, a region called Verdú. And so he left all of that to become a priest. That's a big deal.
Like St. Aloysius Gonzaga, like St. Francis Assisi.
I mean, he joined the Jesuits, which, he finished his schooling, and then he was assigned to Cartagena. And in Cartagena was the main port for the Western Hemisphere to bring in slaves, and then they were dispersed from there. The trip was brutal. I mean, we all have had history class. We've seen the pictures. The trip was brutal on the people that were being transported, the slaves that were being transported, and just the God's honest truth is, not a lot of them made it. Some folks died. And so what Father Claver would do, the slave traders were businessmen. I mean, if I can't sell you or trade you or do whatever, I have no use for you. So Father Claver would go out to the ships. He would feed the slaves, literally sometimes when they were not of good health and headed, towards death. I mean, the slave traders would just leave them on the beach. And Father Claver would nurse the ones he could back to health, and the ones that he couldn't, he would sit with them and provide them with a proper Catholic funeral. He would baptize them. It said that Father Claver baptized over 300,000.
300,000?
Yes.
300, wow.
Well, I mean, it's a hard number to imagine today, but you imagine there's shiploads of slaves coming in.
No, I'm just I'm not saying that in disbelief. I'm just saying, wow, what a tremendous accomplishment.
It's that, like, when I first read it, I'm like, 300,000. I'm like, maybe 3,000. But then, like, when I started thinking about it, I mean, you have shiploads. You have shiploads coming in, and if someone leaves 200 people on the beach to die, and Father goes out and baptizes them so that he could give them a proper Catholic burial, then, I mean, it's not unimaginable.
No, of course not.
But I still kind of, that's amazing, right? That by itself is worthy. Like 300,000 people, that is awesome.
It's an awesome number, an awesome accomplishment. I mean, that somebody would actually, bring that or help bring that many people to Christ. I mean, tremendous feat.
And I mean, so, it's a tremendous feat. And so we like to consider ourselves those people, because he had a group of people that worked with him. We like to consider those the first Knights of Peter Claver, and we're just an extension of those folks. And so we do try to be proactive and at the forefront of some things. Like I said, we were heavily involved in the civil rights movement. We do things around town. One of our things is to be civically engaged. I mean, that's not always the politics of it. That's doing some things, like we currently have a sock drive.
Okay.
And one of the things about the sock drive is it would seem insane that, like, what's this organization doing just collecting socks? Like, right, you should be out raising hundreds of millions of dollars to change the lives of people.
I mean, socks are good.
But though, if you think about it, St. Patrick's Center and Saints Peter and Paul, who service the homeless community, one of the things they never have enough of are socks.
Really?
Yeah, like, so you imagine you have a homeless person, they're out there, it's 30 degrees below zero. Socks can be used in two fashions. Socks can be put on your feet for warmth, or they can be put on your hands.
Sure,
and we know that your bodies, well, I know that because from playing sports and just having coaches tell me and trainers, your body's radiators or your body's radiator are your feet and hands. So if your feet are cold, it's going to shoot you, it's going to fire your body up, even though which can cause some overheat. If your hands are hot, It's going to drive your temperature down because your body's trying to regulate itself based on your hands and feet. So socks play a vital part in survival for many of our communities homeless. And so, yeah, sock drive, which to me, when I first heard it, I'm sitting in a meeting, they're like, we're going to have a sock drive. Socks? Like, what? Who collects socks? Like, no, let's go do something big and change the world. We got to raise $100 million and
We're going to start
build something.
Small. We're going to do
Yeah,
socks.
but socks, crazy enough, to a person like me who hates to wear socks to begin with, it's not a very good idea. But when you hear like, okay, this is why, and the guy from St. Peter and Paul comes in and he's talking about it, it makes sense. It is a huge impact. It's a huge impact on a very large and growing number of people, which is our homeless population here in the city of St. Louis. And, you know, the Catholic Church has always been at the forefront, and the organizations have always been at the forefront of serving the underserved. So that is a big deal. And we're working through St. Patrick's and Saints Peter and Paul. So, yeah.
So what is the reception for people who are receiving the socks? I mean, are they reacting like hey, this is, we really need these things? Are they very appreciative? Do people, yeah, go ahead.
You would be surprised as to how the smallest gesture really impacts someone. Like, I thought if someone walks up and gives me a pack of socks, and people do, like, right? So, like, I have this quirky thing where I don't take Christmas gifts because I always get socks, and like, well, I can go buy my own socks. So just, I tell people, whatever you would do for me, just take it, make a donation to an organization, give it to someone you don't know so that they can get it back. But the smallest thing in a pair of socks, or these really small gestures, it lets you know that there is someone out there that's really in tune to what you need and that cares enough to deliver you something that you may need.
It almost seems like it's personal. I mean, you give somebody, things that other people might not think to give them. It seems a little more personal that way. I mean,
I mean, it's a personal thing, yeah.
Instead of just giving somebody, money or just giving, whatever. I mean, it's something that you wouldn't think to normally give, something, people could really use. And so do a lot of people get into giving the socks or giving out the socks? I mean, is that? Yeah,
so we're working around through the parishes, the 6 parishes where we have courts and councils, and then through some other parishes, some friendly parishes, to get some things done. Like, there are Clavers all over because we kind of have these priests all over who, at some point or another, are in the churches that we operate in, or they're near and dear to us, like Monsignor Ulrich. I don't think he was ever at up at Sacred Heart. I don't think he was ever at a parish that we serviced, but he was very close to one of our members who's been a member here for a very long time in St. Louis, Ruby Douthit. And he just happened to be around when we were initiating Archbishop Herman. And so by him being around, it was just like, hey, they've always wanted you to be a part. Just come on in and do it. And he became a member, so he's up at Sacred Heart. And so we'll be contacting him and, getting this sock drive really going for the winter and fall.
Terrific. So this is probably a good time to do this. This is St. Joseph Radio, coming to you live from the Room of the West, St. Louis, Missouri. And we have a program Saturdays at noon where we talk about things, current events here in and around St. Louis. And today we're talking with, by the way, I should mention this too. If you would care for a CD of this program after our broadcast, the number you can call for that is 1-800-500-4556. The CD will be provided free of charge. We will ask you to pay for postage, but as I say, the CD itself is free of charge. And in addition, there are any number of other CDs here at the studio on different topics. And whoever you talk to on the phone, if you have an interest in something else, I'm sure they'd be glad to send something else. We're interested more about just spreading the word, and that's what you're doing, Leslie, trying to spread the word in all kinds of little ways. And one way is, we mentioned St. Francis before. St. Francis would say, I think something to the effect of, preach all the time, and if you have to, use words. Because it's the actions, it's what you do that makes a difference. And by handing out socks or reaching out to people, that's what you're doing. You're speaking with what you do.
Right, yeah. And so, like, we got a couple of fires going of things we're doing. We do an annual Thanksgiving Day breakfast for needy families, members of the community. And it started off over at Visitation St. Anne. They closed. We went downtown to St. Nicholas, and now we're at St. Matthew's with it, where we just get up on Thanksgiving morning, a bunch of us, and we work and food's prepared and things are done, and we come together and make meals for needy families and shut-ins. So we take a tremendous number of meals to nursing homes and things like that, but we also serve meals there. And we get families that come in who are kind of down on their luck, things. I mean, it's been, well, last year we served a pretty nice crowd. I can imagine that if we're allowed to this year, which, is kind of quirky year, that number's going to be a lot bigger.
That's an understatement, yeah.
I mean, our community's been ravaged. I mean, there are a lot of good people who've hit hard times. And so our Thanksgiving Day meal, we have a joint project with the Knights of Columbus out at Christ Prince of Peace, where we go around to churches who need some work, especially urban churches, inner city churches, which have the community need some work. And we ask the priest, hey, what's something that you need done? Maybe around your church, maybe around the community. We went over to St. Augustine and Father Bob, and he was like, well, I don't, necessarily have a project in the church, but I got some people in my community who could use a little help on some properties. So we did 2 properties at St. Augustine, and it worked out really, really well because we had food for the members of the community. We collected a bunch of clothes from our members, their members. It was great because, like, I got to empty out a closet and people got to empty out stuff and give it to people who would actually need it and use it, and then we fed the community. But we did do 2 beautification projects, and we literally cleared, like, it's amazing. And I have to say that it was amazing because Mike Shea and Vince Klein and those guys and our members, Ison Williams and myself and Gerald Bell and a couple of folks, we went to this community and we cleaned up. And like the property, I was at a property and it was just kind of like we cut down some trees, we cleared some weeds, we got some tree stumps out of the way and made this family's life better. They went over to a place that was an absolute eyesore on the other project. It was an eyesore. And I think they removed like 25 tires and washers and dryers and all kinds of stuff. And like literally, like when I was driving by to come to the site, because we wrapped up a little bit before them, when I was coming by to give them some assistance to the site, like I drove by because it was like I didn't even recognize it. It was like completely different with all these trees cut down. And I mean, the members of the community were very, very appreciative. Our second project was going to be at St. Elizabeth, Mother of John the Baptist. It got cut a little bit short, but it was a project where we're going to do some mulching, maybe work on the curbside appeal of the property, do some mulching on some trees, work on some other things. Unfortunately, COVID happened, and it really kind of X that project. It's still on the table. It's still on our radar. It's just, until we can get back together and really start to work on it, it's off. But yeah, I mean, we've got several things going, which are fun and exciting for the community, and it gives us an opportunity to work together as 2 organizations, 2 Catholic organizations with lots of members that can do some things in the community to have a huge impact together. And I think the most important thing is together. It's not so much what we do, it's that we do it together and that we're doing it in our faith and that we're moving it forward. So it's pretty exciting times.
Yeah, it's a little bit, it's like living your faith sort of in community together. Often enough, the people who are receiving, this kind of help, this kind of assistance are very appreciative. But it's really got to help the people who are doing the work, does it not? Because here you're getting a chance to give to other people. You're given a chance to basically act out a little charity. I mean, there has to be, I would think, room in our lives to, have some time to make room for charity.
I know for me, like doing this really opens up a lot to me. It's almost, so these acts of charity sometimes are very, very painful, but you need to see them. Because
you say painful because...
So I think my first time ever going to Missionaries of Charity, it was hard, right? Because I live in a 5,000 square foot house, and I have a 3-car garage, and my yard's half an acre. And my biggest worries are really superficial. They're like really superficial, like, hey, like what's something that I worry about? I don't know. Oh, is my grass going to be too tall because it's raining too much these last 4 days, right? And there are people out there that literally don't know where their next meal is coming from.
Right. They live day to day, right?
Yeah, and like our greatest problem at our house is, well, what do we want to eat? Do we want to cook or do we want to order out? Okay. So like because my wife and I, we get into these philosophical discussions of, well, what do you want to eat?
Philosophical.
And they become philosophical debates because my wife is like, well, I want something good. Okay, all right. Well, what's good? Well, I don't know. You pick something. Well, okay, Taco Bell. No, I don't want Taco Bell. I'm like, well, okay, well, you pick. No, you pick. I just picked. Like, right? So, like, we get in these debates, and like, that's our concern.
Right. Which of many choices are we going to pick?
Yeah. Like, which really good choice of food are we going to pick?
Do you want something? You want this? Fine. We'll go out and we'll order it out. We'll go someplace. We'll do it. I mean, you can just
and so like going there that first time and seeing like families, like mother, father, children. That hurt.
Yeah.
That really hurt, and I think it hurt more so because I had not realized up until that point how amazingly blessed I was. Like how God had blessed me. And how, number one, I have to be respectful of that blessing. Right? So I go home and it's no more take this for granted, right? This 5,000 square foot house, it's keep it up. It's make sure my yard is good and make sure things around me, and then make sure that I am realizing that not everyone has this, right? My children grow up, and sometimes we talk and they do some charitable work with my wife and myself, and they'll ask questions, and I'll have to explain to them, well, not everyone has what we have.
These things, yeah.
Like, I mean, it's easy for you. You were born into this. You don't know anything other than this.
Right.
But there's a real world out there where people don't have the things you have. And so, one, we have to be respectful of the things we have. But two, we have to realize that there's a world out there, and there are people that need people like us to step up and be a part of a real world. Like on Christmas morning, I always get up and I do the donuts and coffee for the police and firefighters. And I had done I go to McDonald's 2 or 3 days before Christmas, buy a bunch of gift cards, and I would distribute them throughout downtown, like kind of as this thing, like, hey, I want to give back. But like, you realize the impact you have when you give someone a gift card and say, hey, look, go get yourself something to eat, but you don't really know. And it was at that moment that I was standing in Missionaries of Charity, and I was like, this world is so much bigger than which show I'm going to watch on TV tonight. So, yeah, I mean, it can be painful because it requires us to be very, very introspective.
Right.
And I think that's the craziest place for us to be. We don't like dark and we don't like quiet because it forces us to deal with ourselves and be introspective. So, yeah, charity can sometimes be very, very painful, and you have to come to grips with some things. Yeah. And so, yeah.
So tell me, how did you first, what drew you to, the Knights of St. Peter Claver? How did you first get involved with that?
So I was I came from St. Adalbert Parish. I was born in St. Adalbert way back in 1977. And
Way back. Hey, I go farther way back. My way back machine goes farther back than that.
But way back in 1977, I was born in St. Adalbert Parish, and right around 1990ish, our parish closed, and we merged with St. Philip Neri and became St. Simon of Cyrene. Well, part of that ceremony was the Knights of Peter Claver came, and the fourth degree, and they were there, and they were doing their thing, and I remember being in awe, and I was like, hey, I want to be one of those when I grow up. And so that was the first peak, and then obviously I became an adult and was able to become a member and never looked back.
Well, that is, that's very special. So that's how it works. That's how it always works. It just passes on.
Yeah.
So this is St. Joseph Radio Presents. We're talking about the Knights of St. Peter Claver. We're going to take a short break for now, but we hope that you join us as soon as we come back, which will be soon. Hello and welcome back. This is St. Joseph Radio Presents here at St. Joseph Radio, coming to you live from St. Louis, Missouri, the Rome of the West. And with us today, I'm your host, Gerard, and with us today we have Leslie Farr. Leslie is telling us all about the Knights of St. Peter Claver. And just before the break, you were telling us about how, you first got involved in it. You now are spending, a good chunk of your life helping other people. And why? Because other people helped you. You saw the Knights of Peter Claver visit your parish. So that's how it always works. I mean, it just passes on. And so I suppose, Leslie, you have no idea like what kind of difference you're making in other people's lives. So often we go ahead and we do something and then we don't get to see the results. But I'm sure you've touched lives and probably in ways you really don't even know.
Yeah, so for me, I think the rule of thumb for me when I'm doing charity is I want to do it for a stranger, like somebody I'll never see again, or never come in, or potentially will never. I mean, you can't say never.
Why do you want to? Why does that seem sort of intriguing or appealing to you?
Because then it's authentic, right? It's easy for me to help my brother. Like, right, my brother, we have the same mother, we have the same father. He needs something, that's real easy. That's a no-brainer. But for someone that I will never see, that can never do anything for me in return or anything else, it's a difference. And I'd still do things for family and friends, I mean, but I think for me, it's important to do things for people that you will never see again and that can never help you.
It's the gratuitous or the random acts of kindness that really strike people.
And so literally, like I get up Christmas morning with these gift certificates. I just drive around downtown and say, hey, that guy, okay, here, that girl, here. I mean, there's some little bit of discretion to it. Like I'll pick someone who looks like they may be, in need of something, and hey, here, hey, go buy yourself a meal. I think in recent years there have been $50 each gift cards to McDonald's. So not just one day, but a couple. I mean, you'll be able to eat a little bit. I mean, as food prices go up, that $50 means a lot less. But I mean, it's not one meal. Right. Hopefully not one meal. I'll say that much.
It's somebody you don't know. I'm just thinking there's an occasion I really didn't even help the person, but I was driving down the road. It was early. I can't remember now if it was Christmas or Thanksgiving morning, but it was in Chicago, and I was driving down the street, and it was brutal cold. I don't know what it was, like 5 o'clock in the morning, something like that, but it was brutal cold. And there was a homeless person pushing a cart and had all kinds of, stuff, bundled around them. But still, I'm thinking to myself, you can't be out in this kind of weather. And we had an Airbnb type room that we had, rented and so forth. So I just drove past the person, and then I said, wait a minute. Turned the car around, came back, and I was like, this person's probably afraid of me now. But so I told the person, hey, why don't you come back, to the place, that we've got, for the night, and, you can stay with us and warm up and this and that. And, they didn't take me up on the offer. But maybe, I don't know, maybe they just felt good because someone did make an offer.
Well, it's just that thing.
Either that or they were scared of me.
Yeah. So we live in a society that teaches us that we should be afraid of each other. And I don't know that that's necessarily not true, but sometimes you have to have faith. Like, I have people that get on me all the time because on two separate occasions, and these aren't big deals to me. I got a big fancy car and stuff, so it's not a big deal to me. But this one time I'm driving through North St. Louis on Prairie Avenue and on my way to something. And there's this lady, this man, and a small child, and they're pushing a stroller, and they're carrying some bags, obviously clothing. And they were going over to the Grand Motel. Well, I know that now. I did not know that then, but I see them walking, and then just out of nowhere comes this torrential down. Like, it just like somebody took buckets and just started dumping them into the air. Like, it was like tremendously downpouring. And I drove by him, and I was going to keep driving. Something said, nah, you got to go back. And so I go back, and I'm like, hey, where you guys going? They're like, oh, we're just going up to the Grand Motel. And I was like, get in. They're like, are you serious? I'm like, get in. Like, just get in, and I'll take you in and load up the back of the car and put them in. And I take them up to the Grand Motel, and they check in. I mean, it was on my way anyway. It maybe set me back 2 or 3 minutes, but I did that, and I was telling somebody about it. They're like, are you crazy? In this day and age, and you do that? Or there was this guy, it's coming off Enright, going to make a left on Van Deventer, so that must have been west on Enright and then go south on Van Deventer, and there was this guy standing at the bus stop in a suit, and it just starts pouring down. And, like, I don't know what's with me and rain and people, but, like, I see this guy in a suit on the bus stop, and I'm like, I'm looking at this guy, and his voice in my head says, that guy's going somewhere. He's not just standing on the bus stop in the suit just for the sake of being on the bus stop in the suit. And so it's pouring down, and I'm like, oh, man. So I pull over, and I'm like, hey, man, get in, where you going? And he's like, I got a job interview in West County, and I'm just trying to get there. And I was like, he's like, if you could just take me to Metrolink. I was like, you know what? I was going to go play golf. It's raining. I'll take you to West County. Let's go. Let's go, man. And then the whole way he's like, are you crazy? Like, I'm like, no, man. Like, dude, I do stuff like this, but so I was at this organization, a 501c4, and they're a little bit liberal, but they had me come out speak at their national convention in Philadelphia. I'm a very conservative person for people who know me. But I go, like, they're like, but we need a conservative person. And everybody we asked said we should ask you. And I'm like, well, I don't know why they told you to ask me. I'm like staunchly conservative. Like, I'm there with Bob Casey, who's a Catholic senator from Pennsylvania, and he and I are talking, and and we're giving this kind of speech together. And I ran across this organization called Matthew 25. And I wasn't familiar with Matthew 25, so I had to go look it up. And then, because I asked the person, what's the organization about? Like, oh, we base everything we do on Matthew 25. And I'm like, whatever. Is that one of those? I was in my early to mid 20s. I wasn't a Bible reader. I'm still not much of a Bible reader. But so I go home and I read this Matthew 25 passage in verse 31 through 42, and it really sticks out to me. And it's, hey, when the Son of Man comes back, basically Jesus is explaining to the disciples, people, hey, when I come back, you're going to be judged. And here's the criteria. When I was hungry, you fed me. When I was naked, you clothed me. When I was in prison, you visited me. When I was sick, you took care of me, and so on and so on. And And that really struck a chord with me. And it was like, and they're like, well, hey, when we see you, like, no, I would. And that's why I got to the point of doing things for strangers, because their response was, well, when did we see you? Like, I would never. You better believe Jesus. Like, if you saw Jesus and Jesus was hungry, well, of course. We wouldn't let Jesus go hungry.
Right.
Of course I wouldn't let my brother go hungry. Of course I wouldn't let someone that I knew go hungry. That's easy.
Right.
But then he says, well, whatever you did for the least of them,
Exactly.
you did for me.
Exactly.
Like, that's a game changer, right? Because then that says, like, it's not what you actually did for me, it's what you did for this person who was standing on the bus stop, going to a job interview. You had absolutely nothing to do, and you have the absolute means to be able to do this. It's going to cost you, what, $3, $5 in gas to take them out there. You're doing nothing, so why not? Like, right? So it's doing something for that person. It's going to do something for the stranger who you don't even know their name, and doing it for them. It's that family that's walking with small children in this torrential downpour. It's simple, going to serve food at the Missionaries of Charity, or cleaning up around there, or like our organization, when our national convention was here, we painted their chapel. Like, we just went in and painted the chapel, and then some people served food and some people did some other things, but we painted their chapel, and you go, it's like those little things for people who can't do for themselves that really is what we will be defined by as Christians. I mean, like, he says it, like he's when the Son of Man, when I come back, you're going to be judged. Mm-hmm. And here's the criteria. So you do with it what you want. And I thought that was big. I never really contacted that organization or had anything to do with them, because they were like, wait, maybe a little bit too liberal for me. But, that stuck with me, that Matthew 25 concept of doing for the least of them.
Because every person is important, no matter.
Right.
We judge people, if someone's got shabby clothes, if someone's on the street, if someone doesn't have the earmarks of success that we normally, value, we think little of them. But that's not the way God sees it in his eyes.
Well, so you never know who you're standing next to or talking to. Because so there is there's a well-known billionaire. I won't say his name because I don't necessarily want to put him on the spot, but he doesn't dress like I think a billionaire would dress. I tell you what, I look at how he and his wife dress, and I look at them like, they got how much money in the bank? This dude just spent $11 million on nothing, and this is how he dresses? Like, no, man, not me, man. Trust me, if I had billions upon billions of dollars, trust me, I'd be like, yeah. I was like, man, where'd you get that diamond suit from? Oh, I had it made. You like it? Like, no, maybe not that far. But, yeah, I mean, like, you never know who that person is.
Right.
There have been countless times I've read articles where, or seen, like, on these Facebook things where a guy, hey, buddy, you got $1? And the guy says, yeah, man, here, take $5. And then you go around the corner, there's somebody waiting with a $10,000 check. Hey, man, you didn't have to, but you did, so you
That's
never
funny.
know.
I've never run into one of those people with
I don't either. I don't either, but they're out there. They're out there doing this on Facebook, at least.
You talk about strangers doing things for people. So I remember a time, and I was just a kid. I forget, I don't know, I was 8 years old, something like that, whatever. We were driving with my grandparents, and we didn't get to spend too much time with my grandparents, but they were going to take us, and we were going to go tobogganing at a park. I grew up in Buffalo, New York, and there's a park south of Buffalo called Chestnut Ridge Park, a big slope and this and that. Anyway, we were driving down this rural, country highway, and we got in a car accident, and grandmother and grandmother especially was a little hurt, windshield was smashed and this and that, and some people took us into their house, people helped us. We didn't know who they were, and they took us in until our parents got there, and it's just times like that when you have to rely on other people, and they do help you out. And where would you be if there wasn't somebody to do that, for you? I mean, all of us need help at one time or another. I think, when you're talking about how, you never know who you're talking to. I mean, the fact of the matter is, everybody, I think the thing about our faith is that you have to be a little humble. If you realize who God is, it just makes you humble.
Well, I think so. Like being a history major in undergrad, one of the things that made me fall in love with history and move away from zoology and marine biology was the fact that history often is not a what. Like we know what, right? Like in 1492, Columbus set sail. We know what. It's usually a why. Like, why does this happen? What led up to this? Because it's an event that happened, but there is a bunch of stuff that led up to it as to why it happened. And I think that so in that place and time, it's why things happen. But for me, in my charitable acts, it's I don't care why. I don't care why you're homeless. I don't care why you're here at this place with me right now in whatever position that you're in or condition that you're in. What I care about is that you're here. I don't care. You need something to eat. I don't care why you need something to eat. You need something to eat. You need something to eat, I'll take you to get something to eat. Hey, you need a jacket. Like it's like this guy, it's freezing cold one day, and I have a Florida pullover. Well, I don't have it anymore, but I had this Florida pullover, and it was my favorite pullover. I literally would put this pullover on in any circumstance to come out of the house, and it's big with the big gator head logo on it, and it was a Nike pullover, my favorite. And this guy was standing out, man, and he was in a bad way. He's shivering. He's in a short sleeve shirt, and I pull up, and I was like, man, you look like you're in a bad way. And I'm looking at him, and I'm like, man, you look like you're in a bad way. And I'm looking down at my pullover, and I'm thinking to myself, well, I can run the ATM and give him some money, but then he'd have to get to the place to get the pullover, and it's 6 a.m. I'm looking at the pullover, and I'm looking at him, and I'm like, I'm up on Lindbergh by the house, and I'm like, no, I'm like, this is my favorite, and I'm like,
you got those two voices.
Yeah, I'm like, well, if you just don't do something this one time, it's okay, right? It's like,
of course it is.
I was like, and I'm looking at him, and the guy's just like shivering, and I'm like, you know what?
There you go.
I'm like, you know what? And it said an expletive. I was like, here you go, buddy, and I pull off, and I'm like, drive away, and I'm like, I'm never going to get that back. They don't even make that thing anymore. He's like, oh no. But, fortunately for me, I have a bunch of clothes in my closet, and I was not particularly cold on this day where it was a few degrees below zero. And, hey, it's a small sacrifice to help your fellow man. So
one time we were on this religious pilgrimage trip, and they were taking a collection of clothes for people, and same kind of thing. I had my favorite, pullover is a hoodie for my hometown team, the Buffalo Bills, and I have tried to replace that ever since. They were taking a collection for poor people, so I gave this thing. It was my favorite. It was all kinds of weather. I mean, it was the great. And I've tried to replace it or find its equal, and I've never been able to ever since. But somebody, I'm sure, got some good use out of it.
Well, and it's that we do. It's doing those little things for people that no one knows we do that helps us. Like it's insane. Like seeking that help and that understanding in our community. Like especially in today's day and age. Like where we have this vast. I think we kind of know each other, but we don't really know each other. Like we don't know what the other person really goes through because we slip into our humble abodes where we are, and chances are, like, we as a nation, as a community, are fractured. Like, we're fractured along a lot of different lines, like, right? Economic lines, social lines, racial lines, et cetera. And like, a lot of times when I talk to people and I talk to groups, I'll make sure that I point out, we're this really fractured community. We seem like we're not, but then when you get into the guts of it, we really are. Like I tell people, blacks with money usually stay around blacks with money. Whites with money stay around whites with money. So we don't really, there's a select group of people where you have so much money that your group is so small that you just all kind of have to stick together. But for the most part, you know, that's how we live. You know, blacks with money stay in one community, blacks without money stay in another, whites out. And so we're tremendously fractured, and we don't have maybe a lot of understanding.
And you think charity or, you know, doing acts of charity can maybe help some of those fractions?
I think so, but I think like Archbishop Carlson took a huge leap forward during the Ferguson deal when he actually went out to Ferguson, talked to people who'd actually been through this, and then he made phone calls to people like, hey, you know, I'm hearing this, and they're like, oh yeah, oh yeah, man, you have no idea.
Yeah.
And then being like very open and honest. And I think for a lot of black Catholics, it was refreshing to hear him say some things. And I think for some white Catholics, it may have peeled their eyes back, because I remember talking to someone in the archives department. And I remember saying something about churches being segregated. And they're like, oh no, that ended in 1947. Cardinal Ritter ended that. And I'm like, yeah, no. Like literally, because well into the 60s, even though churches had been integrated, they had not truly been integrated. It was one of those things like, you know, hey, like we have members who are old enough to remember when you weren't allowed to come up to the communion rail, even though it was 1960 whatever.
See, I'm sorry, I didn't even know that.
You weren't allowed to come up to the communion rail, or, you know, hey, all the white Catholics at your church got to go first. You sat in back, and then after the last white person sat down, then you got up to go get your communion. Like, and this was in the 60s, because we've members who were born in the 60s right. and 50s who experienced this. Like,
right.
So, you know, and the person from the archives was like, no, we haven't had segregated churches since 1947. I'm like, yeah, but however.
Yeah.
Well, I'll share with you my experience. Like, you know, going to towns. Like, I remember going to Fayette, Missouri, and it was a student teaching assignment. And so I was in a small place, and I go to the local parish, which was St. Joseph's, and I walk in. And the guy at the back of the church was like, oh, I'm sorry, sir. The Baptist church is down the street. And I'm like, well, that's good. I snarkily said, that's good. I'll let someone know that when I'll let the Baptist person I meet know exactly where it is. But I'm Catholic. They'd never seen black Catholics.
Really?
This is 130 miles from St. Louis.
Yeah, wow.
They'd not seen a black Catholic before.
Wow.
In 1996, 7?
Seriously?
Yeah, they'd not seen a black Catholic before. Up in Slater. So Slater has this, and I don't know if it's still open, I'm assuming that it is, this really, really beautiful church. It overlooks the Missouri River. It's like a sky blue on the inside. It is amazing. And so after I started working in St. Joseph's, one of my friends from college, Dan Brown, and I would go to these events and stuff up in the community. And one of the events that they were having as a cluster of events from the counties was to go up to this church in Slater, and we go up there, and it's like they're just at awe, like they're staring at me, like I'm waiting for the kids to say, "Can I touch you?" Like, because they've never seen a black Catholic before. Wow. So like, and even in our faith, we sometimes have those extremes. Like, I did not know that the world's largest basilica/cathedral is in, I think it's Liberia or Ivory Coast or something like that in Africa.
Oh, it's not St. Peter's or...
This particular one...
I mean, St. Paul's outside the world. You could fit 747s inside that thing. This
particular one is, from what they've explained to me, is 3 times the size of St. Peter's.
Wow.
And it's in Africa. And it's in like Liberia or Ivory Coast. I can't remember. But it is massive. Like it holds like 30, 40,000 people. Like it's a football stadium of parishes. Wow. And it's
30,
there.
40,000, that's more than most of, your arenas, pro basketball, pro hockey arenas.
And it's huge. Now, I did meet a priest from Liberia who kind of put some backstory on it. He was like, so they had this guy, Kai's kind of dictator, and he was Catholic, and so he built it. And so it's kind of like,
Did he force people to build it, maybe?
I don't know.
Maybe
That
the
part
dic-
of the story I didn't get, but from what I understand, he built it.
Yeah.
But like there's a bunch of local parishes around that people go to in lieu of this massive monument. Like it is massive from what I understand. It's pretty nice, but like, as a Catholic, you don't learn that. Or some of our strongest bishops, being a conservative, some of our strongest bishops come off of the continent of Africa.
Oh yeah, like right now. I mean, it seems to me that a lot of the people, because we have, we've had priests in the parishes that I've been in who've come from Africa, and a lot of them, it seems like today, that's where the strongest faith is.
Yeah.
Because if you're in the West, if you're brought up in the West, you're brought up with a lot of material wealth, a lot of material goods.
Yeah.
You don't have that grounding, whereas some of the people that come from the poorer parts of the world, whether it's, wherever, they like Cardinal Sarah's like one example of somebody who has a different view than people here in the West do.
Yeah.
So, but anyways, well, Leslie, this has been fascinating. I want to thank you very much for being our guest.
Well, thank you. No
talking
problem,
about a lot of
no
your
problem.
personal
Anytime.
experiences with the Knights of St. Peter Claver and works of charity that you've participated in that are so much help to so many people in and around our community of St. Louis. And it's just this whole subject of charity itself and what it does for the soul of the people who are giving, and the souls of the people who are receiving. It's truly an example of the body of Christ and what it means to be a true Christian. So thank you very much, Leslie, for sharing with us today. We hope you join us again soon, next time, for another edition of St. Joseph Radio Presents. Until the next time, we wish all of you God's choicest blessings.